Hello and a very warm welcome to this recording of the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands 2015 web seminar. My name's David Roth from WPP and it's my pleasure to guide you through the findings from this 10th anniversary 2015 brand rankings. Let's take a look at what we're going to cover. In today's live seminar, we'll cover how the brands are valued, unveil the new number one and the new entrants as we count down the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands 2015. In this special anniversary year, we'll look back at 10 years of BrandZ Global Rankings. What can we learn from the past and what's in store for the future? An exclusive interview with Sir Martin Sorrell. Review what's happened in the categories and across the world's regions. Meet the new number one retailer that's overtaken Amazon. Yes, that's right. Amazon is no longer the world's most valuable retail brand. And find out how to get more information, download the report and access to the mobile apps, and a lot more. So crank up your volume, sit back and enjoy the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands 2015. Well, I'm now joined in the studio here in London by Elspeth Chung, who is the person who's responsible at Millward Brown for actually calculating the brand values. Elspeth, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Hello, David.
We always get many questions, both from WPP colleagues and from clients, about how you arrive at a dollar brand value. I think it's always good to start by recapping that. We've got many new people to the group this year, and many new clients as well, luckily. Yeah. So let's just reprise the concept of how you arrive at a brand value. I mean, first of all, let's start with a data set, because the BrandZ data set really is big data.
Okay, thank you, David. For our BrandZ ranking is powered by the largest brand equity database in the world, BrandZ. And BrandZ is big data. Over the years, we have interviewed more than 3 million consumers, over 400 categories, and we have been doing it for the past 18 years.
Now that database has what 4.5 billion individual data points. So it's big data in a massive way, but also then allows us to do some whole series of analytics and interpret the data in a way which is quite unique. Right. This is the 10th year anniversary. Yep. This year we're covering, 14 categories?
Right. So for the purpose of our global ranking, what we have done is we organized the study into 14 main categories, which we find are most relevant to our daily life. And that also shows the global competitive landscape today, what brands are facing at the moment.
Why is the BrandZ data set so unique in a sense? We talked about just the scale of it, but that's just one side of the spectrum, isn't it?
Yeah, BrandZ is very unique and different, as in we adopt one single standard for the global, regional and the country rankings, and at the same time we listen to consumers, and all our research are endorsed by more than 3 million consumers over the years.
And this is the only brand ranking that looks at consumer focus as well as financial data.
That's correct.
And fuses those two things together.
That's correct, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. But more importantly, we rely on credible market data from Bloomberg and Kantar Retail. And last but not least, our BrandZ Strong Brands portfolio is tested against the leading market indices.
Okay, well, we'll be looking at those indices a little bit later on in this program. Okay. So let's just then take a final look at the constituent parts that make up the dollar brand value that we'll be seeing.
Okay, so for brand value is actually the dollar amount that a brand could contribute to the overall financial value of a company. And there are two main inputs to it. Number one, financial value, which measures the financial returns that a brand could bring to the company, to the brand owner. And for that, we rely on number one, Bloomberg Financials, and number two, Kantar retail sales data, especially for the top retail brands in our ranking. And number two is brand contribution, which is our BrandZ measure of brand equity, and tells us, number one, how much a brand could charge premium and how much a brand could increase the volume. And those two together, we will call it brand valued.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Elsbeth, and we'll be coming back to you a little bit later on in that programme. You're watching the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands for 2015, and now is the time to reveal which brands have made it into the rankings for this year. So let's take a look at this countdown.
And now for my next number, I'd like to return to the classics.
Well, I'm now joined by Peter Walsh, who's directed the BrandZ project at Millwall Brown since it first originated. Peter, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Not only were you there at the beginning of the BrandZ project, but you also there at the beginning 10 years ago of the brand valuations yourself together with Joanna Seddon. So I think it's a good idea if we can both take a helicopter perspective of this year, but also look at a 10-year perspective as well. We've seen which brands are in the top 100. Let's just talk about the value growth that we've seen over the course of the last 10 years, and in particular what we saw in terms of the year-on-year growth this year.
Well, it's quite spectacular, as you can see on the chart, with a line that wiggles up skywise, and over the last year, 2014 to 15, this year, up a stunning 14%, which is a massive number of additional billions of dollars, and is one of the biggest rises that we've seen through the whole period, and certainly since the recession in 2010.
So over that period of time, in a sense, the top 100 brands have contributed significantly to the growth of shareholder value over that period.
Well, they have indeed, and we've seen some very large trends, because one of the biggest ones has been the move towards technology brands in their own right, as well as other brands utilising technology in order to grow their value and their relevance to consumers. So now nearly half of the value in the top 100 is entirely down to technology brands.
And that is interesting from another dimension, because we're seeing the concentration of those technology companies concentrated to the bigger ones over that period of time. A number of technology companies has fallen out, and yet the percentage that technology takes up of the top 100 has increased.
Yeah, the big are growing bigger. They're being even more successful as they are clearly thinking about how they're meeting consumer needs. And so we're seeing they gradually widening their space, both in terms of the services they offer and the innovation behind those services, as well as the regions that they cover. They're becoming truly global.
Technology has grown, but we've also seen another category that's having quite a significant impact, both in terms of its growth and the way its growth is changing.
Well, I think retail category gives us a very good fix on what's happening out there, because we've seen the massive uptake of online brands, which have gone from something like 1 in 7 of the value 10 years ago to now over half. And the casualties, of course, have been the mainstream bricks and mortar brands, which are more hamstrung, if you like, by great big infrastructure, whereas the more nimble online brands have been able to move much faster.
We're also seeing a significant increase in the value that's being driven by the top 100 in terms of shareholder value. Where the rubber meets the road really is in terms of share price growth. What do we see in this area?
Well, I think we can't but forget, and the evidence from the BrandZ big data and these valuations absolutely tells us that the value of brands to corporations is staggering. They are some of the best investments that you could have if you are a corporation. And if you're an investor, again, you should invest behind those companies that have got great brands. Because if you look at the data, we can see that the top 100 most valuable brands with the highest brand contributions, that is, they're more meaningful, they're more relevant, they're more differentiated, and so consumers continue to choose them, their performance is a massive 102, nearly 103% over the period since we began the rankings, compared to the benchmarks of the S&P 500, 63% or something, and the more appropriate MSCI Global World Index, as our rankings now are spread really across the world. In fact, those brands have now, of the companies with the strongest brands, have grown 3 times that level. So brand is really a fabulous investment, and therefore you need to look after it and invest in it.
Well, 2006, Peter, is when you started the rankings together with Joanna. I thought it would be an interesting idea just to take a little look back and see what 2006 looked like. Well, that's what the world looked like. I think if they had some pictures of what we looked like, we might have had a little bit more hair then. Let's just spend a little bit of time just talking about the key observations that we're able to make, looking at the top 100 brands in 2006 and today, delving into that treasure trove of BrandZ data, not just the valuation elements of it, but also how consumers see those brands. What are the key observations and key learnings from the last 10 years, Peter?
Well, the first thing is the vital importance of great branding. Because if you look at the top 100 back in 2006, certainly those 100 brands scored magnificently in terms of being meaningful, different and highly salient with their consumers. So high brand power scores of 142, roughly 1.5 times the average brand. But here we see 10 years later, that's gone up to 170. So even stronger.
And the significance of a brand power score is what?
The significance of a brand power score is that the way in which consumers think about it, feel about it, experience it, manifests itself in the impression that means that they are much more likely to purchase that brand in future or to consider purchasing that brand in future because it's different, because that difference is highly meaningful to them, and thirdly, they feel and know about that instantly, so it's very salient in their minds.
Now, clearly we've had brands that have come into the rankings, brands have come out of the rankings over that 10-year period. You've been having a look at all of that comings and goings. What can we learn from that as well?
Well, this is a key piece of analysis because 58 of the brands were in 2006 are still in the rankings today, which tells you about the robustness and power of strong brands. And if you look at those brands, they have improved their brand equity score, their meaningful difference salient to brand power, to 164. But unfortunately, the 42 that haven't stayed in the rankings, they didn't quite improve enough, so they're still very strong brands, 135, but they've dropped out. And the interesting thing is they've been replaced by a new set of 42 brands, which are even stronger. They're taking brand even more seriously, they're delivering on it, and as a result, they're getting into the top tier.
It's interesting, isn't it, that Apple, our #1 brand this year, wasn't even in the top 10 in 2006.
No, it was number 23.
Innovation, clearly more important than it ever has been.
Well, Apple, you just mentioned, is clearly the definition of innovation from the consumer point of view. They believe it's different, they believe it's setting trends. And if you look across the brands that were in both years, so we can look at the value change over that time, the brands that are more differentiated, more innovatory, if you like, so they're setting trends more, they've grown many, many more times than the brands that are perceived to be less so. So innovation is crucial to future success.
It's interesting. Johnny Ives, Apple's chief designer, now has 5,000 patents in his own name, and that's actually more than Edison had.
He's probably got more hair too.
Okay, so innovation's really now important. What about love, in a sense?
Well, love actually comes out of innovation when we look at our big data. So it's very clear that if consumers think that you're inventing something, innovating something for their benefit, and they try it and it's a really great experience, what happens is they fall in love with you to a much greater degree. And you can see again that the brands that are more loved are certainly the ones that are much more successful. Now, love isn't the answer to everything, because you can be loved but not very effective. But if you're loved because of what really matters to the consumer, that is a big value driver.
So clearly the right type of love is important than just love on its own. I suppose that right type of love centres around this whole notion of differential.
Certainly, because if you're different in a way that fits with your brand proposition, in other words, it's unique to you and drives forward just what it is that consumers really appreciate about your brand and your services, then that is again a winning formula. And you can see again these top 100 brands that are driving difference really are significantly more successful because they're absolutely meeting consumer needs.
Well, Peter, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Well, I managed to catch up with the CEO of WPP, Martin Sorrell, and I began by asking him to take a global view of what was going on in the economy today. Okay, Martin, first of all, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Yeah, it's very nice of me to do this, David.
It is. So 10 years ago, you came up with the idea of doing brand valuations.
I don't think I came up with it, but
well,
it was sort of the sort of miasma of it all. Yeah, go on.
Well, metaphorically so,
yeah, that's right, metaphorically.
Of fusing the BrandZ data with financial data to come on brand valuations. A lot has happened in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
As a global business leader, how would you characterise the last 10 years?
Well, I sort of reflect. I'm a little bit sad about the last, maybe it's not the last 10 years, but it's certainly since Lehman, so it's the last sort of 7 or 8 years, because I think there's been an abject, total focus on cost. Why is it that clients have become almost totally cost focused? The rise of finance and procurement, I think marketing losing power, and I think the importance of brands or BrandZ, the importance of the top 100 brands, the importance of valuation, the importance of fusing the data, the brand data with the financial data, was that there was insufficient emphasis on the importance of revenue growth. This is the critical factor. This is the thing that companies have to do. To survive and prosper, you're not going to survive and prosper by cutting costs. There's a finite limit to do what you can do in cutting costs, whereas at least until you get to 100% market share, which is what we're all trying to do, there is no limit to what you can do on the top line. And the importance of the BrandZ data, the importance of the top 100 globally, or whether we do it in China or Latin America or India, where it happens to be, is it focuses everybody on the importance of that metric. Now, we founded BrandZ, and I say we because it wasn't just me, because we didn't think there was an adequate way of measuring brands. We think that the ways out there are flimsy and academically inferior and technically inferior. We think our way of measuring, using the BrandZ data, the data that was developed over many years by Kantar and Millward Brown, fusing that with financial data from Bloomberg, etc., gives us a really robust way of measuring brands, much more effective than anybody else's, and they should be, in our modest and humble and objective view, the way to measure brands. So it's really important from the point of view of revenue growth, improving market share, and improving profitability.
Over the past 10 years of doing valuations, you said that we started with the global, and now we do a number of country valuations. This year, for the first time, we're going to be doing Indonesia to add to India and China and Latin America. We're putting a lot of resource and time behind that.
Yeah.
Do you think it's really important for the CEOs and the finance directors of major companies to get that causal link now between the investment they put into brands and driving shareholder value?
Well, I think it's absolutely critical, because I think the fundamental point is the organic growth rate of revenues. You can't cut your way to success. So it's not just the CEO or the CFO. It has to be the chief marketing officer, obviously. It has to be the chief procurement officer and the chief technology officer, the chief information officer. All these people are part of the team at the center of these companies have to understand that brands are important. We have to, the analogy is, I think clients are looking at their boots, and we're looking at their boots and our boots with them, instead of looking at the horizon. And we know from the Millward Brown data, we know from the BrandZ data, that if you ran an investment portfolio over 10 years or whenever it is, of those brands at the top, of those companies at the top of the BrandZ rankings, and we compare them to the indices, they always do better. I mean, the amazing thing is, we should have run with BlackRock or whoever, we should have run a fund which had the BrandZ, the top.
It would have been a nice profitable business.
It would have been a wonderful, probably better than WPP's business. But if we got 2 and 20 for managing a portfolio, $1 billion portfolio of those, we know they would have outperformed those companies that didn't invest in brands. You know, it's as Jeremy Bullmore pointed out many years ago. You know, if you have brands, if you want to grow your brands, your $1 billion brands or whatever, you have to nurture them. It's a bit like plants in a garden, I think was the analogy he used. And you have to fertilize them, you have to stimulate, you have to water them, you have to provide them with the right climatic conditions, the right atmosphere. And it's the same with brands. You have to tend them, you have to grow them, you have to invest in them.
10 years over the brand rankings, a long time in business. Probably the most cathartic event over that 10-year period was probably the Lehman's collapse. Many people remember where they were when Elvis died, or 9/11.
Or when the exit poll in the last general election.
Yes, that was very cathartic moment.
Yes, a cathartic moment, yeah.
Where were you when you heard
I was
that
in
Lehman
New York.
was collapsed?
I was in New York, fretting like everybody else that the world had come to an end on that weekend, or might come to an end on the Monday morning. I mean, we had the Bear Stearns, we had the subprime, the insurance monoline crisis, which started in 2007, in August 2007. Then we had Bear Stearns in March. I remember where I was in Florida on that occasion. And then, of course, we had Lehman. And I think Lehman probably is the most important event over the last, and important for negative reasons too, because it has moved people. I don't think it had as dramatic an impact on consumers as it did on corporates. I think since Lehman, it reinforced behavior that was already starting, this cost-focused behavior, already starting to happen. But now it's been exacerbated. And you know, if you're running a business, you sort of, there are two ends of the spectrum really, and then you're sort of sitting in the middle. At one end of the spectrum, you have the sort of 3G models, which have, you know, been very successful, or the Valiant or Endo models in the pharmaceuticals, and the 3G models in CPGs and FMCG. At the other end of the spectrum, you sort of have Uber and Airbnb, and of course Google and Facebook and everybody else, the disruptors. And then you're sort of sitting in the middle, and you have Nelson Peltz on top of your head, and Bill Ackman and Dan Loeb, the activists. Inevitably, it makes people short-term. The average life of a CEO is 5 to 6 years, a CFO 4 to 5 years, a CMO 2 to 3 years, whatever the figures are. But they sort of think in political cycles. And unfortunately, I think they're short-term cycles, not long-term cycles.
We talk about some of those new sort of techno brands.
Yes.
10 years ago, Facebook was what, about a year old?
Yes.
I suppose YouTube had just been invented. Twitter was still the sound of a bird.
Yeah.
Clearly over the last 10 years, technology and digital has had a profound impact on brand building. What have we done at WPP in order to meet that?
Well, there are two things. It's not just that there's a technology bucket, if we can call it that, and there's a geographical bucket. So if I went back to 2000 as opposed to 2015 or 2005, geography, the fast growth markets were probably about 10 or 12% of our business today, almost a third. Digital was virtually non-existent, as you said, and it's now 37%. So I could there's lap over between the two, but I could quite cheerfully claim and justifiably claim that half our business didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. So we've changed at least 50% of our revenue base. But it is the two things. I mean, the technology, which is much more difficult to plan for because of the disruptors, it's very, I wish I knew. You ask Eric Schmidt or Nikesh Arora or anybody, what do they worry about in terms of competition? They say the two-person startup in a garage in Bangalore or Sao Paulo.
Well, they're also paying very good money for two-man bands at the moment, aren't they?
No, that's true, but they are worried about disintermediation just like we are. I mean, it's almost that they think they've become legacy businesses. The BRICS and the Next 11 have driven not just new global companies, but new global technology companies too. And we're seeing, you take Amazon and Alibaba, but we've got Flipkart in India as well. Maybe not profitable, but maybe in the fullness of time will be. So I think you have to look at it on those two dimensions. We've driven it by looking at experimenting in the technological area as well. We've got three strategies. One is to get our legacy businesses to grow faster digital, our digital businesses to become even more powerful from a digital point of view, and then we've cannibalized our businesses. We've made investments and acquisitions on the basis if we don't eat our children, somebody else will. So we've invested in Vice.com, in Media Rights Capital, in Fullscreen, basically in technology, data and content, Rentrack, Comscore, AppNexus and Xaxis. I mean, we created with Xaxis, which I'm very proud of, a $1 billion brand in 4 years.
Looking to the future, Martin, maybe the next 10 years, again from a business leader perspective, how do you see the next 10 years playing out from a geopolitical perspective and then from a business insight perspective?
It's so difficult, David, to say that. Slow growth, I mean, by definition, the blow up we saw around Lehman was unsustainable. The faster growth that we saw pre-Lehman was unsustainable because it blew up. So the system blew up. So it had to
self-correct itself.
Yes, absolutely. So it's corrected itself at 5% nominal growth, let's say, and that's not as strong as we would like to see it. 3% real, let's say. That's going to continue. Pricing power might improve a little bit because we are seeing a little bit more inflation, but probably not enough. So the pressure is still on. The pressure will still be on finance and procurement, and we have to shift that balance. I think the biggest issue, when people say, my favorite question is, what do you worry about, as you know, David? When you ask me that question, it's not about the geography or even the technology, which is what everybody responds to. They say, well, it's the fast pace of technology, yada, yada. What I think the real big issue is shifting people's attention from cost to growth. Because if you think about that slow growth world or that moderate growth world or moderated growth world, what you've got to do is to find the pockets of growth to drive the top line. And that's where I think the brands analysis that we do is so important. The ones that win that are the ones that grow their top line. That's where the opportunities are. So I would say two things in relation to BrandZ are really important. Firstly, our methodology is better than anybody else's. But it's quite clear in my mind that we should become the industrial standard. I'm subjective about it, I know, but we should be the industry standard because the methodology is better than anybody else's, and that's easily demonstrable. The second thing is, this is really important in the debate as to the role of marketing and the importance of marketing. Otherwise, marketing will continue to decline against other functions within companies, CFOs, procurement officers, information officers will dominate, whereas we want the marketing function to have at least an equal voice. And in my view, because revenue and revenue growth is so key for brand growth and TSR and total shareholder return and value, we have to make BrandZ and brand valuation at the heart of that debate.
Well, on that, Martin,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us.
A little objective for you to achieve.
I'll do my best.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Well, I'm now joined by Doreen Wang, who is the Global Head for BrandZ for Millwall Brown. Doreen, thanks very much indeed for joining us now.
Thank you, David.
Let's take a look at some of the detail now in terms of the results for 2015. Let's start with the number one brand. We've just seen from the video the fact that we now have a new number one brand, and that's Apple.
This is the biggest news of this year. We have a new number one. Apple has surged back to be the most valuable global brand, and with a 67% of value increase from last year. And the total value of Apple is $247 billion US, which is equal to the GDP of Ireland. And this is mainly contributed by the spectacular success of iPhone 6. Also, very interestingly, we are seeing in all the recent Apple launch, Apple Watch, Apple Pay, and they tend to use the parent brand name Apple rather than I, which is a very good way to protect their intellectual property. And in the past 10 years, Apple is also one of the fastest growers, and the total equity has grown by 14 times compared to 2006. Initially, Apple was only perceived as a differentiating brand, but it's becoming more and more meaningful and relevant to the consumers. And now Apple is one of the most trusted brands among the top 100.
Well, clearly both being differentiated and being trusted is a very important part of generating brand equity and value. But I think it's interesting to see that this year 67% brand increase in terms of its value on an already very high value. So that type of increase really is something that we haven't seen in 1 year before throughout our 10-year of doing brand rankings. Well, the brand that Apple overtook Google is no small brand either.
Yeah, Google also has very modest growth, and by 9% increase from last year. But compared to Apple, this increase is small because Google faced some challenges. The trust of Google brand has slipped, especially in European market, because of the regulatory and the monopoly pressure Google is facing. Nevertheless, Google is still a very strong brand, and in consumers' eyes, Google is still very innovative.
Well, $174 billion is
very super innovative.
Seriously innovative.
Yeah, and a strong platform.
Okay, if we look at the top 10 brands, interesting as to where they all come from.
Yes, all the top 10 are from the United States, and 6 of them are technology brands. In addition to Apple and Google, Microsoft has become cool again, and thanks to its open platform among consumers. And IBM is experiencing this investment period and is moving to cloud computing. And another big riser is Verizon. It has achieved significant growth on subscriber base.
And I think that just the mix of brands in that top 10 also tells us another lesson, which is we've got a mix of both business-to-business brands and business consumers, of Coca-Cola and McDonald's, the archetypal consumer brand, IBM, the archetypal business brand in a sense. It is possible to create highly valued brands in any sector.
Either sector and have huge opportunity to create valuable brands. Actually, the dividing line between the business to consumer is starting to disappear. And even you are a B2B brand, you still need to ensure your total experience and for the consumers is as pleasantly as possible.
Sure. Well, one of the big, I suppose, awards, if you can call them that, in our rankings is who's been the fastest riser. Who's been the fastest riser this year, Doreen?
Among the 100 brand, the fastest riser is Facebook. And Facebook has achieved a 99% value growth since last year, almost double its value. And Facebook, since the 2010, the first time Facebook is in the top 100 ranking, has already grown the brand equity for over 12 times. So it's a significant growth, not only because of the solutions and tools Facebook is providing, but also because the integrated solutions Facebook put together with Instagram and WhatsApp.
Well, Facebook's the fastest riser. What about the rest of the top 10 fastest risers for 2015?
The top 10 risers this year, so we are seeing Facebook, Apple, Intel, AAA. So 3 drivers, and behind their fast growth. Number 1 is influence of technology. And so the top 3 fast risers, they all have recovered from some financial problems and start to provide even more innovative solutions to the consumers. AAA is a healthy alternative and providing healthy Mexican food in a very nice outlet. And in addition, we are also seeing a new China number 1, a new Asia number 1, Tencent, and a 43% value growth, and providing from QQ to WeChat and the entire social life ecosystem to Chinese consumers.
The retail marketplace undergoing some significant structural change and challenges, typified, I suppose, by the change that we see in our rankings for this year. Amazon now no longer the world's most valuable retail brand.
Yeah, it's also very interesting to see that the retail sector has a new number 1, which is Alibaba, and the biggest IPO in American history, and made the brand's value of $67 billion US. And Alibaba's total value is not from multiple countries, it's only from China, the home market. And however, Alibaba's value has already surpassed Amazon. But on the other hand, for Alibaba, the next lesson is how can they adapt their established infrastructure from China into the global market?
Well, the one thing's for absolute sure, Alibaba is not going to remain a Chinese-dominated market country for much longer. I think we're going to see some interesting moves from Alibaba. Let's take a look at those brands that have entered into the rankings in the top 100 for the very first time this year.
So there are 7 newcomers for 2015, and a lot of them are from faster growth market. So in addition to Alibaba, we also have Huawei, the largest telecom infrastructure company in China. And Huawei is already establishing its presence in over 30 country markets. And also HDFC, the most valuable Indian brand, in servicing small and medium-sized business. And we have Costco, and the wholesale hypermarket, which has received a high endorsement in developed market, now expanding aggressively in emerging market.
Well, for the moment, thank you very much indeed, Doreen. Well, Doreen's spoken about Alibaba, as has Peter. And many of you might be sitting there thinking, Alibaba who? Well, we thought it would be a good idea for us to take a deep dive to understand the history of Alibaba and what it is they do and why they're such an amazing force in today's retail marketplace. Imagine a marketplace like this one here in Shanghai, where you could buy pretty much absolutely everything at any time of the day or night. Since its initial public offering here at the New York Stock Exchange on September the 19th, 2014, one brand has gone from complete obscurity to an international overnight success story. It's created a massive online marketplace. On that historic day, the Chinese brand Alibaba raised a massive $25 billion through this exchange, going from obscurity to the largest IPO in history. Alibaba is one of 3 market-driven brands which combine to make up about half of the value of the BrandZ Top 10 most valuable Chinese brands for 2015. Tencent and Baidu, the internet giants, Zhang, Men, Ren, are the other leaders. 2 dynamic forces have been in play shaping this brand's phenomenal success. Chinese consumers are connected and e-commerce is taking off here in China big time. Just like Steve Jobs of Apple, one man and his vision, stamina, character and daredevil attitude had the guts to take on Silicon Valley and, well, dare I say it, win. His name is Jack Ma from Alibaba. Today, Ma is China's richest man, worth a staggering $21.8 billion, thanks to the firm's recent IPO. As they say in Chinese, buka sui, unbelievable. Ma famously thought of the name Alibaba and its association with a magical cave while in a San Francisco coffee shop on his first visit to the US back in 1995. He asked the waitress what she thought and was told it made her think of Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. For good measure, he then asked another 30 people outside on the street, and regardless of their own origins from Tokyo to Germany, most knew of the story of Alibaba and how the words "Open Sesame" revealed the cave's treasures stolen by the 40 Thieves. Alibaba, a kind of businessman, eventually outwits and defeats them. It's a strong brand association. Until its sensational IPO listing this year, few outside of China had even heard of it. So what makes Jack Ma so successful? Perhaps it's his resilience. Ma was born in Hangzhou near Shanghai in 1964, the son of 2 professional ping-tang local opera dancers. This is a traditional form of Chinese storytelling and ballad singing. So it's not surprising then that performing comes naturally to him. He's self-motivated. Ma taught himself English as a teenager by cycling 40 minutes every day to the city centre to act as a free tour guide to foreigners. He even made that journey in the snow. As I said, buka sei, unbelievable, but this crazy man who tells other corporate CEOs to do crazy things is mission-driven. He's set out to make it easy for his customers to do business everywhere by helping small Chinese exporters, manufacturers and entrepreneurs to sell at home and sometimes internationally too. And his brand has done just that. The Alibaba Group has now grown into a multi-billion-dollar business. It runs e-commerce business-to-business services, web portals, an online currency and payment service called Alipay, and a shopping search engine. It's just added cloud computing services to this list. Today, Alibaba has 3 major sites. Alibaba, which is a business-to-business site, Tmall, a business-to-consumer site, and Taobao, a consumer-to-consumer site. It also has 7 other technology-related services that make up their commerce ecosystem. Together, Taobao, Tmall and one other, Zhuhaoxiao, a price comparison and coupon site, generate more than 80% of its revenues. Alibaba's Chief Operating Officer Daniel Zhang is to become its new CEO, replacing Jonathan Lu. Zhang faces challenges despite recent improvements. Alibaba's growth is still half of what it was 2 years ago, and gross merchandise volume is still at its lowest growth rate for nearly 3 years. Chinese regulators are pursuing Alibaba for allowing counterfeit goods on its sites. but Zhang is a key architect of the Singles Day's success story, and its fourth quarter earnings were higher than Wall Street's expectations. Its marketing teams are imaginative and driven. In 2009, to boost sales, it created Singles Day, which now has become the world's biggest online retail sales day. It compares with Cyber Monday in the US, the Monday after Thanksgiving, which is also marketed as a big online shopping day. What began in China in 1993 as a student-led anti-Valentine's Day at Nanjing University, where single people could buy things for themselves, has been transformed by Alibaba. The November 2014 Single Day pulled off a record in sales, a staggering $9.3 billion just in one day. To achieve this, nearly all 30,000 merchants on the internet retailer's platform offered discounts, and a few days later 278 million packages were being distributed throughout China. And at places like this is a university campus just outside Shanghai, these packages today are being picked up by the students who made a lot of those acquisitions on Singles Day. And now there's talk of Alipay working with Apple Pay. The US is definitely in Alibaba's sights, in more ways than just one. Some even speculate that in the future there could be a marriage between Alibaba and eBay. From the dark of a thief's hidden cave to the magic of what could be stored in the cloud, Alibaba is an incredible brand story. Jack Ma is a living example of a person who's lived and contributed to the China dream and succeeded. He motivates others to aspire to and live that same dream, and in so doing, Alibaba is providing employment to many in China, particularly the young. Ma is a man who has done an incredible thing. He's created a brand that Silicon Valley is watching, and he may well rival it as well. Chinese consumers love Alibaba and him. Just like Alibaba's cave, this online shopping marketplace has treasures that others prize. But will he be able to keep its rivals at bay? And remember, in that fable story, Alibaba does win in the end. Well, if you're new to Alibaba, I really hope that that's given you a good understanding of the brand and the man behind it. Peter, thanks very much for joining us again. We're going to take a look at some of the categories that are underneath the growth figures that we've seen. Let's first of all start by taking a look at luxury. Always a nice place to start with.
Indeed, and luxury is a good story with some of the brands, particularly Chanel, because Chanel relates to China, which we've just been looking at, and it has addressed in a transparent way, and the first of the luxury brands to do so, in terms of sorting out its pricing, its differential pricing between Hong Kong and China and the rest of the world. So it has reduced prices in the East so that it's much more evened up. And part of the rationale is to ensure that China, one of their biggest markets, the consumers there can happily purchase the great Chanel products, in this case, in their local markets without fearing that they're paying over the odds. And this is crucial for Chanel because it means that those consumers can go and experience the brand in their local areas with the great experience in retail that can be offered there, so that the whole brand experience becomes a much wider and deeper engagement with the consumer.
Now, luxury per se actually hasn't done very well in terms of the year-on-year growth, has it?
No, it's been challenged very much by financials and exchange rate issues in China, slowing down its growth, Russia, Brazil, very important markets for luxury. But however, there's a great consistency with the luxury brands that are there, and although as a category it hasn't really grown, it bodes well for the future that they can really go back to what's really meaningful about those brands.
Cars is interesting to look at, isn't it?
Well, cars, again, another category that suffered very much since the recessions, hasn't grown at all, really. But when you look at two successful stories of Audi and Ford, again related to China, both of those brands done very, very well in China. Audi is very interesting because this leading growth brand within the car category, 43% this year, and in spite in China of no longer being the official government car, its sales within China, because of the strength and attractiveness of its brand, have gone up 25%.
Apparel.
Yes, another category that's been toughly challenged by recessionary times. But what we see here is a very interesting story about a brand leader and communications. So this is Nike. And what it's done, it's been a very innovative brand in terms of its products that it's developed and delivered, but communicating the essence and enjoyment and excitement of the brand through sponsorship of Brazil World Cup, Sochi Games, Super Bowl and so on. So it's a perfect example of the perfect storm, if you like, of strong brand being meaningful and communications on top of that.
Well, Peter, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. You'll be back with us a little bit later on. Well, it's impossible in a programme like this to do justice to the vast amount of data and analysis across all the 14 categories that we cover in the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands. But you can take a look at all of that and a lot more if you take a look at our new revamped website, www.brandz.com. You can look at it and play with the data. Take a look at this. So please do take a look at www.brandz.com, but not until we've finished this. Dorian, thanks very much for joining us again. Let's take a look at the regional sort of world, what's happening across the world in terms of brand value.
Yeah. BrandZ is the largest brand equity database worldwide. We cover 43 countries for over 100,000 brands. And this chart is the regional leaders. Like America, the most valuable brand is Apple, and China is Tencent, and Germany is SAP, a strong B2B brand, and with very strategic business development plan across Europe. And UK, Vodafone is the most valuable brand with a 6% value increase. Louis Vuitton, the French luxury brand, and has come back to the monogram design and achieved a good value increase. However, this brand is facing challenges in markets like China and Russia because of the decreasing demand. And last but not least, Brazil, beer, Skol, and one of the fastest growing brand over the past 10 years.
Well, it's always nice to see beer growing at a tremendous rate.
Yeah, and all the top 4 are beer in Brazil, but Skol is the number one.
I've contributed to some of those numbers in Brazil this year. I think it's also interesting because that is very much a microcosm, those brands that you just talked about the value transfer and the value growth that's happening now across the world. America very much coming back. I think that's one of the key stories of this year's Top 100, the resurgence of American brands, and also how the fast growth markets are still, even though their growth has slowed down, still outpacing, I suppose, the established markets of Europe.
Yep. They have already.
So moving specifically to Europe, we see a sort of a pretty sluggish growth of 2% on average.
Yeah, it's significantly lower than our total 100 most valuable brands growth. And the number 1 is SAP, and followed by Deutsche Telekom. But a few of these brands are continue sustainable growth, but some of the other brands are facing more challenges.
And the UK, I suppose technically the UK is in Europe still, but we are looking at it slightly separately. What do we see there?
We see a value decline of 4% compared to last year. We are seeing some brands like HSBC and Barclays, and they are the brands who have dropped value because of very diversified reasons.
Yeah, and I suppose hitting the UK hardest, I suppose, because clearly being very dominated by big sort of financial brands, and I suppose some of the issues that we've seen recently in Tesco's as well, reflecting their decline as well. Latin America.
The 4 beer brands are still the top 4, and Skol is number 1, and followed by Corona. And all these brands have achieved some certain level of brand equity increase, although not significantly, and mainly because of the economic macro environment and we're facing in Brazil.
China.
And China grew from only 1 brand in the year of 2006 to 14 brand 2015, and the total value growth of the China top 10 is 38%. So when we look at 10 years ago, China Mobile was the only brand in the top 100, so the single child. And now it is accompanied by the other 13, and a lot of them are entrepreneur brands or private brands, and which have increased the value even much more significantly than the state-owned enterprises.
I think it's very interesting to see that sort of balance. You know, when we started doing the rankings in China 5 years ago, China Mobile was all-powerful. It was very difficult to see any brand overtaking China Mobile in terms of its brand value, but clearly Tencent have done that this year. And
Tencent and Alibaba have succeeded, yeah.
And the sort of the change that we're seeing now in the more entrepreneurial brands in China growing at a significantly faster rate than state-owned enterprises. Okay, what else do we see from China in terms of the age of the brands in comparison to other markets around the world?
So that's a very good question, David. When we look at these Chinese brands and compare it against US and European brands, and we find that the average age of Chinese brands is significantly younger than the other countries. They are on average 38 years old. So younger means less experience, but in the meantime, younger also means less baggage. So many of these brands are very ready to ride the digital wave and change their infrastructure to adapt to the needs of digital era and the emerging needs from the consumers.
I think France is really interesting as well, sort of average age 102 years old, obviously reflecting the craftsmanship of some of the luxury brands.
And legendary brand too.
Okay, and moving on really to how the fast-growing markets have changed their sort of structure within the top 100 over the course of the last 10 years.
10 years ago, the fast growth market brands only occupies a very small percentage of our top 100 ranking. But this year, we are seeing almost 1/4 of the total value is contributed by fast growth market, mainly from China. And we're also seeing that this brand power is gradually moving from the European market to Asia and specifically to China. And so the next question is, we are going to see how many new emerging markets brands coming into our list, and maybe more Indian, more South Africa and Latin America brands will appear in next year's top 100, and we really look forward to that.
Well, Doreen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, as fast-growing markets are becoming more and more important for brand building around the world, we will, for the very first time, be looking at a new market to do a country ranking for 2015. Take a look at this.
First, there was the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands. Then came the BrandZ Top 50 Most Valuable Brazilian Brands. And soon after, the BrandZ Top 50 Most Valuable Latin American Brands. And then, the BrandZ Top 50 Most Valuable Chinese Brands, which soon increased to the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Chinese Brands. And for the first time last year, the Top 50 Most Valuable Indian Brands, launched by Sir Martin Sarl in Mumbai. Now, coming soon, for the very first time, the latest in the BrandZ Country Valuation Suite. The BrandZ Top 50 Most Valuable Indonesian Brands 2015. Here's why. The world's fourth most populous nation of 253 million. 43% under 25. With 32 billionaires and millionaires growing at 22% per year, where mobile is everything. Penetration rate higher than the US, China, India, and Japan. The world's biggest soap exporter. Currently the world's 16th largest economy, but forecast to become the 7th largest by 2030. Overtaking Germany and the UK. Coming soon, August 19th, 2015.
Well, so don't forget to mark on your calendar August the 19th for our latest brand country rankings. Well, Elsbeth, welcome back again. We want to talk now about the trends that we've seen across the various categories that we analyse in the top 100. What are the key observations that you can make from looking across the categories?
Right. Over the years, we see that there are a few common trends that are shared among different categories. And let's focus on a few that we think are very big challenges to the brands nowadays. So first of all, disruption, the big bang. So disruption, a very good example is in the financial services category. So what happens to this category is it has been quite risk averse thanks to the regulatory requirements that they have to follow. And also they have been very reactive, very passive with technological innovations. So because of this background, the technology giants such as Apple, Google, in China, there are Tencent, Alibaba, and Baidu. They are given the permission to enter this category. It's exactly because of the financial services brands are very slow with what they could offer to the consumers. So this is number one. Another big trend that we will see is the growing health concern. So it's been around for many years. But what we see is, for this one, I have to go back to one of our fastest rises this year, Chapelade, a Mexican grill brand. They have been having a very strong pledge for health over the years. And to them, it's not just a written promise. Earlier this year, they have announced to ban on the use of genetically modified ingredients in their food products. And to that, this also comes back to the quest for higher meaning in branding. Because for Chapelade, they are not just serving very nutritious, yummy food. They're also satisfying the consumer demand for healthier option, healthier lifestyle, and also environmental sustainability. So that's what makes them different.
Elizabeth, thank you very much indeed. One of the key trends that cut across every single category is technology, and how brand owners and marketeers are using technology to build even closer bonds with their consumers and to use it for fast-paced innovation. One of the key disruptors over the course of the next few years will be the development of the Internet of Things. And we at WPP have an interesting seminar for you to understand the implications. Today, the only constant is change. With billions of new connections and trillions of data points, the next disruptive force is the Internet of Things, a new era for brands and growing brand value. Personalization, analytics, location insights and sensors will interact to change the way we communicate with consumers across the new path to purchase and profoundly impact the way we shop. Prepare for the future now. Join us for a WPP event for agencies and clients across the group. Retailing to the customer of one in the Internet of Things age. Understand the impact of the Internet of Things. Hear from industry visionaries and leading industry experts. See practical solutions revealing disruptive innovations, including a fast-paced fashion show style experience revealing futuristic Internet of Things designs from the leading design schools in Europe. Gain insights, ideas and actionable learnings. The new revolution in connectivity between brand owners, retailers and shoppers. Thursday, the 17th of September 2015 in London. Hosted by Emily Maitlis, BBC journalist and Newsnight presenter. In association with. For more information, go to www.internetofThingsAge.com. Well, I very much hope that you and your clients will be able to join us at that event. Peter, let's now take a look at those 10 years. What key takeaways do you think we should all be reflecting on, looking back and forwards at what that 10 years worth of data is telling us?
Well, that data is very, very clear. It's three things. It's setting trends for the future, it's the value of love in doing so, and it's ensuring that you maintain and continue to be different. Now, of course, it's very difficult to set trends. You've got to try and anticipate them, and that can be risky. But if you know your consumer with research from BrandZ and other sources, then you're in a much better position to do so. Clearly, love is something that you've got to ensure that you don't find ways in which consumers can fall out of love for you. So don't give them excuses not to love you, and make sure that you deliver on your promises so that love does follow as part of a great experience. And of course, difference really does make the difference, provided it is anchored in what the brand proposition is.
So if those are the three areas that we need to concentrate on to drive brand value for the future, what are the levers? What do you need to pull in order to achieve that?
Well, I think you've got to think big. And the first one is, does my brand really, or can it really, make people's lives better?
It sounds a bit trite to say that, you know, impacting people's lives. But from your analysis of the data, those brands that have actually done that have done considerably better, haven't they, over the years?
They absolutely have. And that difference can be very big, like a Pampers making, you know, world's population, new population, healthier and better for the future. Or it can be something as simple as giving somebody a nice experience. Coca-Cola happiness, for example. Those are all things that do improve our lives, whether in a small way or a big way. But they're genuinely beyond the self-interest of the brand from the point of view of the consumers. And the second one coming out of that, of course, is really being a brand that consumers believe that they actually understand that you care about them, whether that's delivering a nice tasting product or whether it's something that really is going to make life significantly better for you. And those aspects, of course, if you can deliver those in a genuine, transparent way that's meaningful to consumers, means that what you are doing is building the core building block of valuation, which is becoming a brand that's much more meaningfully different. And you have to keep thinking about that. You have to keep delivering that with the brand experience. And crucially, your communications need to underline that in a way that reflects what your brand actually has delivered.
Well, Peter Walsh from Millward Brown, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, during the process of taking the valuation data, understanding what it means and creating the report and the analysis, we've talked to many of the WPP company brand experts across the group. In fact, we've had many sessions of our sector experts across the world understanding and talking about the issues within their particular sector. And now is the time for us to hear a few things about what those experts are predicting the future is going to bring.
I think what we're going to see is a lot of really big luxury brands. They've gone mass in the past couple of years, and now that's going to contract. I think we're going to see a lot more focusing on the retail experience and really bringing their brands to life through that in-store. Also, you're going to see a lot of brands really making moves in digital.
What we're going to be seeing now, I think, is innovation in the data center. I think the role of cloud computing, of real-time analytics is going to completely sort of change where the power lies in tech, and it's going to be all about what happens inside the largest companies and inside the largest cloud hubs that's going to determine what happens from here on in.
I'm really interested in data overall. We're going to see just a tremendous explosion of data with the Internet of Things. Data privacy becomes more and more important as we move forward. Whose data is it? Is it my data? If it's about me, or is it your data because you collected it? Who owns it? Who protects it? And are there ways in which it can be used to really transform the way that we live today?
Yeah, I guess one of the other things is the need for speed. So we've seen in recent years the sort of proliferation of 4G or LTE offerings. Last year alone, 2014, saw that explode again with, I think, 96 new LTE operators or services throughout the world. So people are thinking that the need for speed has somehow plateaued. Don't think that's the case.
So millennials and their interest in cars is a topic that comes up a lot when you work in the auto industry. And I don't think it's as dire or drastic as they're not going to want cars, but certainly their relationship with cars is much different than it was for teenagers or people in their 20s years ago. So years ago it was very much a form of freedom, and now it could be seen as more, you know, a burden, something extra you have to pay for every month. Their form of freedom right now is their cell phone, and they constantly have access to their friends and others. They don't need the car as much as you used to. I think you could think of it more as just a way to get to point A to point B. It's a much more practical outlook on it.
Yeah, I think I'd want to say that the store still matters, even as we're talking about this notion of the integration of physical and digital. Shoppers still want an experience, and they still want products now, and that's certainly the assets that get us there. So retailers that are able to elevate that store proposition and perhaps serve new needs of shoppers, whether that's through services or an added experience, I think are also going to be very well positioned in this marketplace going forward.
I think 2015 presents an opportunity for someone to take leadership in the oil and gas category. And what does that mean? That means understanding that the world has really changed, not just in terms of the oil price, but also other macro factors affecting the industry worldwide. We've got climate coming back onto the agenda at the end of the year. So the time really is now for someone to really understand these big changes and to redefine the corporate narrative for the sector in a way that is going to take leadership.
Clearly, with 4.5 billion individual data points, the BrandZ dataset is useful for many more things than just arriving at brand valuations. Jim Pryor from the Partners and Lambie Nairn had a question, and he went to the BrandZ treasure trove to seek an answer. Well, I'm here with Jim Pryor, who's the Managing Director of both the Partners and Lambie Nairn. Something we like at WPP, a man with 2 jobs and just 1 salary. And in front of a very impressive trophy cabinet, lots of D&AD awards and many other design awards for the Partners. Jim, thanks very much indeed for joining us. You've gone through a very interesting process. We talked earlier in the webcast about how big the BrandZ data set is and I suppose what a treasure trove potentially it has. You had an interesting idea and delved into the BrandZ treasure trove to see what would come out of the thought. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Well, we had a hunch really to start with, which was that it must be possible to use the data and the changes in data over time to show some causality around what's been driving brand value. And in particular, as a brand consultancy business, we were interested in seeing whether we could show that the type of work we do has an influence on how brand value moves over time. So we went back over 10 years of BrandZ data, looked at the changes in brand value growth for all of those brands within the database, and then cross-correlated that with data from Millward Brown on consumer opinions of those brands, looking at both how consumers perceive the brand in terms of how strong the idea that's at the heart of that brand is, how strong the identity of that brand is in the way that it projects itself over all the touch points, and compared that to consumer perceptions of how strong they felt advertising was with those brands, and the intention of that being to try and establish the relative impact of investment in each of those areas, or strength in each of those areas.
So we've always, I suppose, through the last 10 years for brand valuations, been able to get to the numerical brand value of a brand, but I suppose you're, through this analysis, able to now start to help understand, well, what do you need to do, what levers do you need to pull in order to actually increase that brand value?
Right, exactly. What drives brand value growth, where's the ROI greatest, and not looking to say that one thing works better than another, but really what's the right combination. So I think what this data will actually help marketeers and brand owners to do is to make decisions about where is the right areas to prioritize, what are the sequence of events that one might want to look at in looking to drive growth and drive value into a brand. And what we were able to find there was some really interesting data. So what we found was that brands that have got strong brands working in parallel with strong advertising have grown by a vastly superior extent to those that have just invested solely in strong advertising, or even those that have invested solely in strong branding. But there's quite a remarkable difference that one sees in the value that is created when a full and complete investment is made in branding in parallel with other marketing activities.
So I suppose it's that sort of triangle of really understanding what the brand stands for and where its positioning should be, being able to articulate that well, communicating that, and then using both sort of advertising, traditional advertising, digital, and a whole variety of creative techniques in order to multiply that effect.
Right, right, and it's a great advert actually for horizontality, which is another great WPP principle. So for example, we showed that brands that are investing in great advertising, or at least perceived to be creating great advertising, but are not perceived to be to have strong brands, have grown in value over 10 years by 27%, compared to brands that are perceived to have strong advertising but also perceived to have strong brands, have grown in value by a massive 168% over that same 10-year period. So the difference is quite incredible. And actually, when you look at the fact that the cost of building a strong brand, investing in the processes that lead to a strong brand, are really only a fraction of the cost of media that one would need to invest in order to drive great advertising. There's a very strong argument, I think, there for why a brand should look at a balanced portfolio of activities with strong investment in driving a clear and distinctive brand idea, strong investment in a cohesive and a coherent brand identity, and then when that works in parallel with great advertising across all of the different touch points in media, so as you mentioned, digital, conventional, etc., the value that's created is multiplied to a much greater extent when that package is complete in that way.
Well, Jim, a fascinating piece of analysis, and you can read more about it in the report, the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands for 2015, and later on we'll be giving you information about how you can download your own copy. Well, for the moment, Jim, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Jim Pryor from the partners, also from Lamb & Nairn, and a number of other WPP companies as well. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, Character Z is available to all of us colleagues in WPP. All you need is your Inside WPP password to take a good look around. And if, like Jim, you've also got a question you'd like the WPP BrandZ dataset to help you answer, please do contact me. We'd love to help you. Well, we've almost come to the end of the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands 2015 webinar. In the report that we've created, you'll see a whole host of additional analysis and insight that's there for you and for your clients. It's full of insights from the 10 years and also looking at the year-on-year changes across all the categories that we've talked about and a lot more besides. It also contains thought leadership articles from a number of our WPP colleagues from operating companies right across the world. All you need to do is go to www.brandz.com and download it. There you will also find a whole host of other material that you can use. All the videos that we've showed today and a whole host more. So please feel free to download them and use them for yourselves, for your colleagues and for your clients as well. And don't forget BrandZ on the move, our mobile apps. All you need to do there is go to www.brandz.com/mobile and you can have them on your device and take BrandZ with you and the data and brand news with you on the move. Well, all it's left for me to say is thank you very much indeed for watching. It's very much appreciated. Thank you to everybody who's appeared on this webcast today, to the team at Westbourne Terrace for the production, to 2in for the videos. Thank you very much indeed for watching. For me, David Roth at WPP, goodbye.